Story 1. About 4 to 5 days after my liver transplant, my blood counts were still quite low. They provided me with 4 units of blood over the course of that day, and the next day, when I woke up, it was the best feeling I have ever experienced. Finally feeling my body function correctly again after such a long time was truly the most remarkable sensation I have ever felt. Story 2. I had a deviated septum repaired and nasal polyps removed. After the surgery, they packed my nose with gauze. When they went in to pull it out, it felt like they were recreating a scene from a movie. But once it was out, I swear I saw and heard angels singing. Story 3. I cleared my sinuses by flushing with water. I squeezed the water bottle in one nostril and applied pressure as hard as I could. To my amazement, the entire plug of mucus inside my head dislodged. I could see and certainly feel the large plug as it traveled down my nasal passage, reminiscent of a scene in the original film Total Recall, when the main character removes an implant from his head. With one final blow, I expelled the largest single piece of mucus ever. It measured about 1.5 by 1 by 1 inches and was pliable. Couldn't be pulled apart and would have required a fork and knife to cut. The sensation as that plug released was the most satisfying non-sexual feeling I have ever experienced. Many future attempts failed, but I will pursue that feeling until the end of time. Story 4. I live with chronic pain constantly. One day, my pain was so severe that I had to go to the emergency room. They injected me with morphine, and within a few seconds, I felt a significant wave of relief. This happened over 5 years ago, and I still remember that feeling. It was better than anything I have experienced. Story 5. I am a 51-year-old male with constant tremors throughout my body, diagnosed with essential tremors at 13. I have been experiencing these vibrations for 40 years and will continue to do so. It is not nearly as debilitating as Parkinson's disease. The first time I tried my current medication, I experienced a complete cessation of tremors. I had never felt anything like that in my life. It was amazing. However, that effect has since diminished as I have adjusted to the medication over time, and the condition is degenerative. Despite that, I had an incredible and remarkably calm few days. Story 6. I had rectal cancer, and they removed my rectum and connected me to an ileostomy bag. After 4 months, they removed the bag and reattached my intestine. During the procedure, they had inserted air to help visualize my insides. When I regained consciousness, I felt an enormous pressure in my abdomen, and for the first time in a long while, I farted. It lasted, no joke, for over 45 seconds. A loud, forceful release of trapped gas. It was absolutely glorious. Story 7. My back pops in just the right way, releasing every pain I have and allowing me to be fully flexible again. Story 8. One time, I was recovering from a flu or cold. You know that feeling when you're better but still have a lot of mucus? I had a large booger that was crusty enough to pull out. When I removed it, it just kept coming. Felt like it reached all the way to my lungs. It may sound gross, but the sensation of it sliding up my trachea and being able to breathe better was incredibly relieving. Story 9. When I was broke and could barely afford to eat, I finally had some money to make pasta. That feeling of having a warm meal after surviving for days on stale toast was incredible. Story 10. I had long COVID for 2 years and I work in the wine industry, so my sense of smell and taste is literally part of my job. The main symptoms were parosmia and altered taste. Many of life's most delicious things like garlic, onions, coffee, chocolate, wine, anything fried, and most meats uniformly smelled and tasted like rotting garbage. After almost losing hope while searching for information about parosmia related to COVID, an article about using a stellate ganglion block as a potential cure was published in a medical journal. I spent several $1,000s and flew directly to the doctor who was performing the procedure before it became more widely available, and I had it done. 15 minutes after the procedure, a nurse brought in a plate of chocolate, Cheetos, and Doritos. This is common practice because people suffering from this long COVID symptom report similar groups of food smelling and tasting bad. When I tell you the heavens opened and the angels sang, I am underselling it. I sobbed. In summary, I had a procedure to address long COVID and ended up crying happy tears into a plate of Doritos. Story 11. When the anesthesia took effect, it washed away the horrible pain of an infected tooth root. The dentist stepped away for a moment, and I cried tears of joy from the relief of no longer being in pain. Story 12. I would suggest that after a full day of work, you take a hot shower, enjoy your favorite drink, and then relax in a freshly made bed. Story 13. I had an experience that was so intense it left my face numb and slightly paralyzed for a few minutes. I couldn't speak or move my face to express how enjoyable it was. Update. Thank you for all the love and inquiries. It was her first time and she did research to improve her skill. Clearly, she learned well. In terms of technique, it involved a lot of teasing and play with minimal strokes. Story 14. In terms of pure pleasure, the first time I tried MDMA, I had a great night and spent at least an hour stroking someone in a PVC jacket, which felt like the greatest thing I've ever touched. I've had better experiences in life where I've had more fun, bigger thrills, and more emotional joy, but pure physical pleasure from MDMA was unmatched. Don't do drugs, kids, but if you do, make sure they're safe and you're with good people. Story 15. The first time I was physically intimate with my best friend of 22 years, after she told me she had been in love with me all this time, I was finally able to admit that I felt the same way. Story 16. One time I experienced pleasure so profound that the orgasm temporarily changed my entire outlook on life. Physically and psychologically, it was the best feeling I have ever had. Story 17. I hiked 25 miles over a few days in Shenandoah and finished with the Old Rag hike. The entire experience lasted 4 days, covered 39 miles, and involved an elevation change of about 2,900 feet. Afterward, my hiking buddy and I got a burger and found a hotel. We showered and fell asleep in clean linens in the first real bed we had encountered in nearly a week. Both of us slept for over 12 hours straight, then woke up and shared an intimate moment. With the bliss from the workout, combined with joy and rest, I experienced a level of happiness that I had never felt before in my life. Story 18. When I see my mom, she gives me a big hug and tells me I'm handsome. The delicious food is already plated. It's everything. Story 19. When I was 14, I liked to sleep in my parents' garden. One summer break, I would always wake up at 7 a.m. for some reason, and then go inside and watch YouTube or Game of Thrones. One morning, I still felt tired, so I fell asleep in my chair. When I woke up, a wave of refreshment and alertness that I had not felt in a long time rushed over me. So I guess my answer is good sleep. Aside from that, it might involve other activities. Are you all telling me that feeling tired all the time is not normal? Story 20. Once, I thought I had sprained my lower back, and the pain was excruciating. The relief I felt was more satisfying than anything else. Story 21. One time when I was a kid, I was so tired from being outside all day that I laid down on the couch with the sun shining on me and slept for 16 hours. I woke up not knowing what day it was and felt like I had my whole body reset. Story 22. I received ketamine for a dislocated shoulder, and the experience was surreal. I had never felt so at peace with myself before, and my body felt incredibly good. I can't even find the words to describe how pleasant it was. Story 23. My first orgasm. I was 17 and didn't even know it was a thing, so I wasn't expecting it. There was no sense of pressure, which can be a real block for women if we aren't careful. I suddenly became very aware of my body on this journey I had never experienced before. I was in a secure and trusting relationship, so I felt comfortable letting go and going with it to see where the journey would take me, allowing my body to do what it wanted. He obviously knew exactly what he was doing. Then suddenly, there was this overwhelming awareness of every sensation, like an insatiable itch that he was doing his all to satisfy. It was strange because he needed no guidance. It was as if he instinctively knew where the problem was. I trusted him, and the next thing I knew, he had tipped me over the edge, and oh my God, there are a few milestones to becoming a woman, and that one surpasses them all and even makes up for some of the less pleasant ones. That was a night to remember. Story 24. In my early 20s, I was addicted to distance running. I would run 14 to 17 kilometers 5 days a week before work. After a run, my calves would get really itchy. To this day, I have experienced no greater pleasure than scratching them in a hot shower. No experience in my life has come even remotely close to that dizzying intense pleasure. Story 25. When they handed me my baby after 30 hours of labor and 2 hours of pushing, I felt the most excruciating pain of my life, followed by a strange emptiness. However, when they placed her in my arms, I was overwhelmed with an intense physical joy like I had never experienced before. It was pure ecstasy, from head to toe. Story 26. I had surgery that required spinal anesthesia, temporarily paralyzing my entire lower half. Post-operation, I was happy not to feel anything while receiving intravenous fluids. I was told that I would regain control of my lower half in about 3 hours. 5 hours in, I still had no control. It was a challenging time to learn how sphincter muscles work. You need to activate your pelvic floor muscles to be able to urinate. I was trying my best to let go, but it wasn't working. I was simply unable to urinate. However, the urge to go and the bladder pain were very much present. After 3 hours of crying and moaning in pain, I was able to convince a doctor to catheterize me. Friends, I cannot even begin to explain how good it felt to finally let go. The sound of my urine trickling into a mug was music to my ears. I passed about 700 milliliters that day. The doctor had to call a nurse for a second mug since one wasn't enough. The whole process took around 5 minutes, which were also the most awkward 5 minutes. Nurse holding a rapidly filling mug, doctor assisting me, with metaphorical crickets chirping to the soothing sounds of my soul being returned to my body. Story 27. I was with a girl, and my morning usually begins with morning arousal. I was awakened to her engaging with me intimately. First, I was confused, but it felt incredible. She clearly knew what she was doing, and the experience was overwhelming. She returned to sleep as if nothing had occurred, and I lay there in bed, feeling as though I had an out-of-body experience. Story 28. Amazing intimacy with someone I was deeply in love with. Imagine all your nerve endings heightened to an extraordinary level of sensitivity, where you can feel every atom of a breeze individually. Now imagine that same level of sensitivity as you connect with your partner in the most intimate ways. It's like experiencing pure bliss. Story 29. The first time I received oral sex, my partner swallowed. Felt great, but it was the way it happened. I had only been with 2 women before, and both were very adamant about me telling them when I was going to finish and that I should not finish in their mouth. Shortly after high school, I was living with a roommate, and he invited his cousin and her friends over to hang out. This girl and I were connecting all night. Around 2 a.m., her friend said, "I don't think we should drive home. Can we stay here?" She told me her friends could sleep in my room, and she would sleep in my roommate's. The girl and I went to my room. I offered her my bed, saying I would sleep on the small sofa I had. She insisted that she would not take my bed but would get in it with me if it wouldn't inconvenience me. Within seconds, we were under the covers in our underwear, making out, and she started performing oral sex on me. As I felt myself getting close, I warned her that I was going to finish, and she kept going. I said it again, and she sped up. "Hey, for real, I'm going to finish." And she stopped, came up to my face, smiled, kissed me and said, "It's okay, baby, just finish," and then went back down. I blacked out shortly after that. It was euphoric. Story 30. Dilaudid. It was the first time I had ever experienced an opioid that made me think, oh, that's why people get addicted. I totally understood it after that. For those who haven't had it, I thought I was experiencing kidney stones. The emergency room doctors thought so too. It was an overwhelming amount of pain that came in waves. They administered an intravenous line and pushed some Dilaudid into it. A cold sensation rolled up my arm, and the moment it reached my brain, the only way to describe it is to imagine being out in a thunderstorm and then walking under an awning. That feeling of stepping out of the rain and into a peaceful and calm space, that's Dilaudid. They could have started hacking my arm off, and I would not have cared in the least. I told the emergency room nurse when she returned that we were now best friends. Story 31. I lay in the hospital for 2 days with a burst appendix. When in pain, I become quiet and serious, which is the opposite of what people expect with pain like appendicitis. Post-surgery, I experienced extremely severe complications, causing the worst pain I have ever felt. During rounds, the consultant, now aware of my pain reaction and seeing that I hadn't slept all night, immediately prescribed morphine. The first words out of my mouth were, "Oh wow, that is lovely. I feel so soft." Then I finally conked out and fell asleep. I was on it for 4 days, and I regret not having family around to record me because the nurses and doctors enjoyed the unusual things I said. Apparently, I talked a good game because I even got the cute trainee doctor's number. Story 32. Not adult-themed, but it would have to be when I threw my back out and the doctor gave me some muscle relaxers. Later that day, I sneezed and popped everything. If I ever went to a chiropractor, that is what I would want to feel. Story 33. Besides intimacy, for me it would have to be scalding hot water on a poison ivy rash. The relief is pure euphoria, the closest sensation to an orgasm that I've felt. Story 34. With chronic back pain, being in a pool feels amazing, but I am almost immediately reminded of the pain as soon as I get out of the water. Story 35. I went to the dentist to have a cavity filled. They used a blue latex dental dam for the procedure because of its location in my mouth. Afterwards, my gums on one side were still irritated and painful, as if something were stuck there. I could feel something at the edge of my gums. 2 days later, I pulled out a piece of the dental dam, providing instant relief as soon as I removed it. Story 36. I was with a girl, and as I reached my climax, she ran her nails through my hair across my scalp. That is the best orgasm I have ever experienced. Story 37. I had brain surgery, and they had to cut the nerves to my nose to access the tumor. I was told I would never smell again. However, those nerves can regrow. 2 years later, I was in my friend's truck headed back home when the first thing I smelled was fried chicken. After 2 years without the sense of smell, even an unpleasant odor would have been somewhat pleasant. But the smell of KFC was amazing. Story 38. Eating a ham, cheese, and Doritos sandwich after swimming all day as a kid was the most satisfying sandwich I've ever had. Story 39. Not being able to reach an itch and running downstairs to search for the back scratcher while expressing frustration for 10 minutes before finally finding it and scratching the itch. Was that too specific? Story 40. I was with my wife, and for whatever reason, the experience was incredible. I felt like I finished multiple times, just waves of pleasure. I've never experienced anything that good before. Story 41. One of two things occurred. I had a heart attack and was in screaming agony for hours. When they placed the stent through the blockage, the relief was immense. But the real truth is that I experienced something extraordinary, being pleased by two incredible women simultaneously. Story 42. I had an ex-girlfriend come home heavily intoxicated and then take 5 strips of acid. An hour later, we went to the bedroom, and she performed oral sex for an impressive 3 hours. I now understand the concept of multiple female orgasms from a male perspective. It was enlightening. Story 43. When the dentist drilled into a tooth that had been throbbing for 3 days due to an abscess, I cried for 5 minutes. The feeling of relief was so intense. It was over 20 years ago, and I remember it as if it were this morning. Story 44. One time my best friend and I were intimate, and he made me experience an incredible level of pleasure. I literally couldn't think for a few seconds, and no one else has ever been able to achieve that. Story 45. I let my boyfriend persuade me to try anal again after much convincing. I had previously attempted it at 18, and it was extremely painful, resulting in a serious injury that required surgery. I vowed never to try it again. Then I met a man who was skilled in bed. It felt like leaving my body and experiencing something entirely different. Story 46. There are many great options, but here is one. My wife and I once accidentally made tacos that were of 2 Michelin star quality at home. I nearly jumped on the table and spiked my plate as if I had just scored the winning touchdown of the Super Bowl. I didn't realize that food could taste so good it felt euphoric. Making those tacos gave me an absolute sense of victory, but I have never been able to replicate them or find anything as good since. Story 47. I shaved my head to 6 millimeters a few years ago and went to a large swimming pool with many bubble areas and not too many people around. I decided to float on my back with my eyes closed and let myself drift. After a while, my head entered a bubble stream, and it felt like no other physical pleasure I had ever experienced. The short hair on my scalp became hypersensitive, and the shivers ran up and down my entire body, all over my skin, without peaking or dissipating. It was nothing like a regular scalp massage. Imagine the peak moment of an orgasm, only I wasn't horny, just completely relaxed, and it lasted for about 20 minutes. It was truly transcendent. I had no idea my body could experience that kind of sensation, especially from something as ordinary as bubbles on my shaved scalp. I want to share this with everyone I meet, but it feels like oversharing something inappropriate, even though there was nothing sexual about it. Story 48. Hot bath when stiff and cold from snow-related activities. Clitoral stimulator. Whoever invented that device deserves a round of applause. Story 49. I once sneezed 35 times in a row. I cannot explain it, but after the 10th or 11th sneeze, my brain must have rewired. I had a quasi-religious experience through it. Story 50. I have 2 exes who follow me here, so I won't be specific. One of them gave me the best experience of my life. To whichever one of you is reading this, it was the other one. Story 51. I would like to say orgasm, but in reality, it was taking a hot shower with a powerful sprayer head, hitting my heavily poisoned ivy-covered shoulders and chest. Dear God, I have never felt such beautiful agony before or since. I never really understood the concept of BDSM until that moment. There is a phenomenon where pain tips over into pleasure. Story 52. I had a memorable experience that I think about often. It was so enjoyable that it has affected me for several years. Story 53. Nose decongesting after being blocked due to a cold, and you can suddenly breathe through the nose again. Story 54. I have a 3-way tie. The first is when I got home from an unexpected 18-hour shift. I remember my face hitting the pillow, followed by a wave of bliss and a feeling of weightlessness before I fell asleep. The second is when I took Benadryl for a severe allergy day. I had a strange fever dream, and when I woke up, I felt momentarily immortal. The third was an intimate experience that was enjoyable but is the least interesting. Story 55. The aftermath of an hour-long session in a sensory deprivation float tank is remarkable. The full-body relaxation, combined with complete silence and the mental clarity it offers, is extraordinary. Story 56. When I was younger, I went to see an escort. While she was providing me a service, she applied pressure just below the anus, and I experienced the most powerful orgasm I had ever had. Story 57. I had a stiff neck and tight traps for weeks and couldn't stand up without pain relief. One day, while crossing the street, I turned my head to look for oncoming traffic and heard a very loud pop in my neck. I experienced immediate relief from the pain and spasms. It was the best feeling ever. Story 58. Waking up at 3 a.m., realizing it is Saturday, and falling back asleep under cold sheets with rain tapping on the window. Nothing beats that. Story 59. No pleasure, no rapture, no exquisite sin greater than central air. Seriously though, whatever they gave me in the hospital while my body tried to pass a kidney stone. Story 60. While pregnant with my second child, I experienced sciatica. I couldn't sit, lie, or stand still for any length of time. Sleep was impossible. At the time, I lived in an apartment in a square building. I would shuffle around the square hall for hours just to find a bit of relief, and when I was completely exhausted, I would pass out sitting up for about 30 minutes. I tried everything. One of my doctors recommended acupuncture in the ears. I was skeptical but also desperate, in incredible pain, and near delirious. I was willing to try anything. After a few acupuncture sessions, I went from being convinced I would be permanently crippled to crying in relief. Story 61. When I was a teenager, I had been out all night with friends riding BMX. I got home at around 6 a.m. During that twilight time, I walked into my bedroom and remember basically collapsing onto my messy, unmade bed with cotton sheets. It felt like I didn't just land on the bed. I fell into the abyss of fluffy clouds that was my bed and fell asleep as I was falling. I was completely exhausted, but that is a vivid memory. Story 62. An ex of mine, for whom I still have feelings 20 years later, would softly scratch my back. There was more love in that simple exchange than there ever was in my 17-year marriage. Story 63. I had nerve damage in my shoulder and was in pain for 4 days. When my arm started to feel numb, I went to a walk-in clinic. They informed me that I had nerve damage and that there was nothing I could do except wait it out, which could take a month. I then visited a walk-in chiropractor. I explained the situation, mentioning that I had pulled a muscle or tendon in my arm while lifting something heavy, and that I had slept on it awkwardly, which led to pinching a nerve. He felt the knots in my muscles and showed me a diagram of the area where he believed the nerve was. When I laid down on the bench, I found it difficult to lie on my stomach without my arm going numb and tingly. He confidently stated that he knew exactly where the issue was and adjusted my bones in the perfect way. It felt as if he spread the bones and tendons apart, finally relieving the pinched nerve. Suddenly, I regained all feeling in my arm and experienced an incredible rush. Intense sensations shot down my arm, and my entire body released a surge of serotonin-like chemicals that I had never felt before. Story 64. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. Story 65. I got some banana bread at work today. My mom told me that if I wait for things, good things will happen to me, and I waited for some things and received banana bread at work today. It just goes to show that waiting for things is worth it. But there are a lot of bad things in this world. Like skunks, no thanks. Scratching your eye, but it's still itchy? No way. The Cubs? No thanks. Getting paid a small amount for working? No way. But banana bread at work? Yes, definitely. Story 66. I almost collapsed from how good it felt after I shaved my head and used a spider-looking head massager. Story 67. The first time I performed oral sex, I was inexperienced and experimenting with a friend. I wanted to try it. Feeling him become aroused in my mouth was surreal, knowing I was making him feel that. Feeling him go completely rigid before ejaculating unexpectedly almost made me lose control as well. Right after, he reached down, wrapped his hand around me, and pumped once, which caused me to climax immediately. I have never experienced such a quick release in my life. Needless to say, we both really enjoyed it. Story 68. My partner and I shared an intimate moment when she was 8 months pregnant, and the experience overwhelmed me. During her pregnancy, our intimate moments were less frequent, which likely contributed to the buildup of anticipation. That release was incredible, and I find myself wanting to recreate that experience more often than seeking conventional intimacy. There was something truly special about it. Story 69. I have suffered from eczema for a significant part of my life, and one of the guilty pleasures I had was soothing an itchy spot with a hot shower. No doubt it was making the problem worse, but for a few seconds, I was in a state of unimaginable ecstasy. It genuinely felt like my skin was experiencing intense relief. Story 70. Not the best, but there's a reason it's called fecal euphoria after a good bowel movement. One of the best feelings is trying on clothes a size smaller after dieting and having them fit. I felt elated after fitting into single digits again. Another joy is taking a calming gummy at the end of a busy day, like my strawberry flavor. I feel like I'm dissolving into my armchair. Story 71. When the masseur managed to get the back muscle to relax, it was like a huge release of pressure. It was an amazing feeling. Story 72. Fentanyl. Before anyone gets upset, I want to clarify that I was in a hospital, and it was administered to me by a doctor. I had been experiencing extreme abdominal pain for several days, and receiving that medication provided immense relief. Apparently, my body was so relaxed that I almost stopped breathing, and the nurse had to keep reminding me to breathe. Story 73. When I was a teenager in middle school, I would come home from a cold soccer game to a warm house, take a warm shower, put on dry pajamas, and enjoy a hot dinner. I was spoiled by my mom and complimented by my dad, with a fire in the fireplace and my cat next to me, having nothing to do but read for the rest of the night. I loved it then, but I really miss it now. The security of having everything taken care of for me, the love, the lack of worry, and not having to be in charge of anything or anyone. Now, as a mother with a difficult marriage, I would love to have a couple of hours to feel that sense of relaxation once in a while. Story 74. Everyone, or most people at least, loves intimacy. One partner I had was a constant squirter. She would experience multiple peaks of pleasure in one session, and it was simply blissful. I will never forget her. Story 75. Shower after backpacking for 10 days in the Rocky Mountains. The water dripping off my body was black. Story 76. In my early 20s, I had my first kidney stone. I found myself on the ground in a fetal position, crying. I was taken to the hospital where they gave me a medication called Dilaudid. Within seconds, I felt normal again. There was no pleasure or ecstasy, but the relief from the pain was the most amazing experience of my life. Story 77. I suffer from an autoimmune disease that makes my skin itch and causes inflammatory reactions where they shouldn't occur. Just imagine sore and torn skin around my joints on my hands, arms, and legs. Movement is impaired, and pain and scratching are daily challenges. Salves or other therapies never worked. Recently, my doctor prescribed a new medication specifically designed for this disease. It interrupts the signals from my immune system that trigger false reactions, and the results are remarkable. Others may not fully understand the relief I feel right now. It really works. My skin is recovering, and the pain is almost gone. It's getting better every day, and I am grateful for the advancements in science and medicine. Story 78. I once received a remarkable experience during a threesome. It's when one partner provides oral pleasure, and the other engages in anal stimulation simultaneously. Story 79. Moments after you give birth, the relief of being done with labor and delivery is amazing. There is nothing like it. Story 80. I don't know if it was exactly the best, but the most satisfying experience for me was running my tongue over the front of my teeth after my braces were removed. Years later, I still remember that feeling. Story 81. I waited a long time before I requested to try such things, and I wish I hadn't. My girlfriend stimulating me is amazing. I never thought I would reach orgasm, but the feeling is so lovely. It's a real pleasure that is rare. When it happens, it is very much appreciated. We also tried pegging, which I wanted to experience and honestly thought would be disappointing. Pegging takes a bit to get used to, and I'm sure it's the same for women too. It feels weird to have something going in that area. It feels like you need to have a bowel movement, and being paranoid about that can ruin the whole experience. However, once you do it a few times, you really get accustomed to things going there. Most of the time, there has been no mess, and for males, prostate stimulation is a strange feeling, but it can lead to one of the best orgasms I've ever had. The consistent attempts at pegging have been very worthwhile. It took me 3 or 4 tries to become comfortable and truly enjoy the sensation. I'm sure others will adapt quicker, or it may take longer for some, but that first prostate orgasm truly is incredible. Men often have limited options. From very early in life and throughout most of our lives, our only means of orgasm is through the penis. Women can experience stimulation of the clitoris or the G-spot, and they can have multiple orgasms. Men are often thought of as people obsessed with sex and orgasms, so we need to normalize men enjoying anal stimulation because it is fulfilling. It's also wonderful when your partner gets involved too, wanting to fondle you while performing oral sex or stimulating the anus while pleasuring me. This extra exploratory and sensual touch while engaging intimately is very welcome compared to just lying there. Story 82. I visited a chiropractor once and had every vertebra adjusted. I have never felt as satisfied since. Story 83. Finding that itch on my back that I can barely reach, but then I hit it just right and take care of it. Story 84. Pulling back into my driveway after a long and dangerous car trip to get drugs. Knowing that I have the entire weekend to do nothing but indulge in unhealthy food and play video games, without worrying about money or acquiring more substances for a few days. Drugs are harmful, and I have been clean for almost 10 years. Knowing that I will never use drugs again is a close second. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.